Welcome to another beautiful day in paradise, otherwise known as Antigua and Barbuda, a pearl on the necklace of the Caribbean. As you can see behind me, the sea is quite still today. There's very little wind, which is unusual in Antigua and Barbuda because there's normally the perfect east wind for sailing around the Caribbean. But one of the things we have in Antigua and Barbuda is our beautiful coral reefs, diving, snorkeling, beautiful marine life, coral. It is a beautiful place. But there's always a serpent in paradise, even in Antigua and Barbuda, and the serpent on the coral reef is the lionfish. Lionfish are destroying the coral, they're eating the fish, and we had a couple of weeks ago a lionfish tournament in which we caught nearly 1,000 lionfish, which was great fun, but actually just shows the extent of the problem. Lionfish is very good to eat, and the tournament had its own chef competition. We were all able to taste it. Very tasty, but you have to know how to cook it. So I'm talking to a number of experts on lionfish and fishing to find out exactly what the problem is and what the danger is to the coral reefs, not only here, but around the world. I'm Zoe Carlton.
But first of all, I'm going to Julio Camacho, who is a regular guest of mine, to talk to us about what is the problem with lionfish and what are they and what do they do. But first to Julio. Good morning, Julio.
Good morning, Zoe, and good morning to the rest of the team, and good morning to all your listeners here. It's a little rainy. I'm sorry that you got wet this morning.
Absolutely drenched.
I think your insurance idea is probably a good one.
Julio, we were talking about another pest on air a few weeks ago, and now we're talking about the lionfish. Now, they're very beautiful. I've seen them on the reef. You would think they are harmless, but they are causing a lot of damage to our reef, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they are. The lionfish are what we classify as an invasive alien species. Normally persons hear the word alien and they think extraterrestrial, outer space, and it's nothing like that. But essentially, it's just that lionfish are a species that are not native to our area, in this specific scenario, not native to our marine waters. Yeah. And so there aren't any natural defenses against the impacts that they're having, and that's why they're actually having such a negative problem.
So what sort of damage do they do? Because they eat other fish, don't they?
Yes, but it's not just that they eat other fish. I think when the lionfish question first raised up, and it really started back in the 1980s, I think, is when the first report started to come out. A lot of conversation was around them eating other fish, and it's not quite that straightforward. It's more about them eating juvenile fish. So it's not that they're eating the large snappers and groupers and other fish that you're getting at the market. What they're doing is they're often eating the juvenile fish, and often they're eating the juvenile prey species of these same snappers, groupers, etc., that we value so much as a market fish. And that then has a knock-on effect on the entire ecosystem, not just because of the loss of prey for these predators, but also because of the impact that this massive reduction in these smaller fish like damselfish and what's not can have on the functioning of the coral reef ecosystem.
And these other fish are very important to the ecology of the reef, aren't they?
Oh, they're extremely important. I mean, I know growing up in school, we often learn of food chains and we think about this, single chain going down. Natural ecosystems are like the most complex spider webs that you've ever seen. And, removing or shifting the balances in one area can have tremendous knock-on effects, some of which aren't necessarily visible immediately, but you can see them over time, and some of which can be immediately visible. So it is one of those things where we're quite concerned, not only for what we know that they are consuming in the shallow waters, but also for what they're potentially doing in the deeper areas. So crustacean, and they eat everything from crustaceans to fish and other juvenile organisms. So everything from your little lobsters, small shrimp, small damsels, snappers, anything small, they're extremely good at hunting, Zoe. That's the one thing I'll say.
Right. And so this tournament that we're having coming up, as well as a big commercial thing, it's very important for the protection, actually, of our reefs.
Yes. So just one slight clarity there. It's not the first tournament that we've had, but it's the first one of this scale. Yeah. There has been a couple other tournaments. I think in 2017 may have been the last one. I think what this tournament is really trying to do is get a real comprehensive understanding of how big of a problem we're seeing in Antigua and Barbuda about lionfish. We know that they're there. We have seen them. We recorded them here first in 2011. And again, there has been several cases. I think they're a delicious food fish. And most of the persons who have introduced to them do agree with that. There have been some misconceptions about the harmfulness that they can have to us as human beings. But I think part of what this tournament is also trying to address is trying to get a better idea of, okay, we know we have some lionfish, but do we have the numbers that you're seeing in places like Florida, or is it a smaller problem? And I think that's really what we're trying to target with this tournament.
Yeah. And of course, we really would like the local fishermen. It's not just about super international fishermen, is it?
Oh, no. So the other big idea of this is to help to promote and push the local market for lionfish. So one of the things persons understand is the difference between them being venomous or poisonous.
Right,
and the easiest way I say to persons about this, Louis, is if I bite you and you die, I'm venomous. If you bite me and you die, I'm poisonous. So lionfish are venomous. So they actually store their venom in spines. And once you remove those spines, the flesh is perfectly fine. To me, it's a white kind of flaky meat, and it's extremely delicious. So the other idea is to really get the local fishing population to really be into this tournament, not only because of the great prizes that are available, and I'm sure Martha will touch on that a bit more, but also to ensure that persons understand that this is a viable food source. These fish reproduce at crazy rates. They are proven to be a problem on the reefs, but if we can make it into a consumable, a target species, then that may be the way to solve this problem. So that's really what we're also trying to push here to China, demystify some of the myths around this whole lionfish issue.
Thank you, Rulio. Dr. Steve Gittins is the chief scientist of NOAA, who actually invented a lionfish trap to try and find a way of catching them. Dr. Steve, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you, Zoe. I appreciate being on.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Now, you are very knowledgeable, I know, about the whole problem of this. We're focusing on Antigua and Barbuda, but this is becoming a worldwide problem, is it not?
I wouldn't call it worldwide, but it's definitely widespread. It's certainly all across the Western Atlantic, from North Carolina to South America, and everywhere in between throughout the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean. But there's also a lionfish invasion going on in the Mediterranean Sea that originated through the Suez Canal, we believe, from the Red Sea. So, East and West Atlantic are affected by an invasion by lionfish. The Pacific Ocean, lionfish are native there, so they're not a problem there.
So where did they come from? How have we suddenly, or it appears that we suddenly have this problem?
It really isn't that sudden. They've been around the Western Atlantic for about almost 40 years now.
Oh, right.
But in really low numbers throughout the 1980s and 1990s, and their populations didn't explode until about 2000. But the way we believe that lionfish invaded the Atlantic was through the aquarium trade. People, particularly in the U.S., who are very keen on aquarium fish. Oftentimes have fish that they have problems with once they get big. In other words, they eat all your other fish in your aquarium. So a lot of people who don't want to kill their pets by euthanizing them in some way or slowly freezing them in the freezer instead of, killing them, but killing them that way. They'll put the fish out in the water and just let them go in fresh water, salt water, whatever, thinking they're doing the humane thing. But in fact, it can lead to real problems. So it's very likely that somebody had an unwanted pet, a lionfish, that had been decimating the fish in their aquarium, that said, I got to get rid of this fish, and put it out in a canal near their house. And when enough people do that, the populations build up to a point where eventually they start reproducing and can have devastating effects like lionfish have.
I mean, and that is the problem so often with plants and animals and fish, isn't it? That people take them as pets, find they're not manageable, and let them loose into the wild.
That's exactly right. It's happened with so many species. And that's why we believe it's the most likely cause of the lionfish invasion, as opposed to some more exotic, less likely causes that people have suggested, and they're possible. But this is the most likely cause.
Now, I'm very interested in your lionfish traps. Obviously, can you catch them the way you would a normal fish, or does it need spear fishing, or what ways of catching them are there?
Yeah, it's really quite different than either spearfishing or other traps that you're used to seeing. The lionfish are a unique breed of fish in some ways because they're very docile fish, and they're very attracted to structure. So when they see a structure, they go and sit there and wait. And then they'll go off and hunt and something during the day, and they'll come back to these structures and just hang out for shelter and for protection. So when I learned about that behavior, I wondered whether we could develop a trap that would just attract lionfish to it, and then only close when the fishermen showed up, and then contain the lionfish only at that time. So it was a baitless trap that lured the fish simply by having some structure present. And it's nothing but a big, looks like a giant taco that when it hits the bottom, it opens up and lays flat on the bottom. And then upwards from the center extends a big piece of plastic sheeting. And then there's a line that goes up to the surface or over to another trap. And when a fisherman, or when the trap is deployed and opens up on the bottom, fish are attracted to it and just come and wait and sit there and think of it as shelter. And then when the harness is closed by the fisherman, the taco wraps around the fish and contains them like a giant change purse, and they can pull it to the surface. So it's a quite different kind of trap. But the benefits of it are that they cause very little damage to the bottom when they touch because they're very lightweight. And they also don't attract other fish nearly like they attract lionfish. So you don't catch unwanted species like you often do in other kinds of containment traps.
Martha, this isn't a tournament, this is a festival, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, today is the culmination of the 2 days of hunting that were actually the Lionfish Derby for the hunters, which was Friday and Saturday. We had about 40 hunters out. So this is the culmination, which is celebrating what's been done, which turned out to be amazing. I think we're going to be bringing in around 1,000 lionfish.
Wow, that is a lot of firefish.
Yes.
Shows you the extent of the damage.
Totally. And they're bringing in a lot of really big ones, which means that there are a lot of small ones out there. So that's significant to note. But we're really excited that it's not just about the hunt and the fishing. This is about marine awareness for all of Antigua and Barbuda, to be aware that our marine environment is precious and priceless. No blue, no green. If we lose out there, we lose here. So it's really critical that people teach the young people and the children to start valuing our Antigua precious coastline and the marine environment. And one of our big threats is lionfish, because they're an invasive species. So here today, we're not only hunting, we're cooking. We've got over to the left here, we've got 5 of Antigua's top chefs who are doing cook-up. The judges will be judging themselves, and they'll be actually doing tasting for the public. The public will be able to taste lionfish appetizers. It's a delicious fish. It's also one of the highest fish in omega-3, so it's very good to eat. So we'll be doing that, and then we're doing jewelry making. These are lionfish earrings that were made by one of our instructors, who's a lovely lady from Belize, who's teaching our Antiguan ladies and a few men to make lionfish jewelry out of the beautiful fins, because although they're invasive species, they are they're beautiful fish, and they have beautiful fins, as you can see here. So we're doing the jewelry making. We also have an ongoing series of educational lectures. I'll be speaking in about an hour. We have some of the top U.S. experts in lionfish who are presenting over the next 3 hours. And then we're going to be doing our prize giving and presentations, because this particular event is the largest purse of any money given in Antigua. We're going to be giving away to Antiguans in the hunters, the chefs, and the posters that young children, school children have been making, 34,000 EC dollars.
Wow.
So it's a lot of money that people are going to walk away with, which we're delighted to be sharing with the public. So I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm looking forward to tasting the lionfish and to the rest of the afternoon. So thank you very much for being interested in all we're doing.
And while the fishers are fishing, the jewellery makers are jewelling, the speakers are speaking, and the sellers are selling, the chefs are also chefing. There's a competition here to see who can do the most with lionfish. Let's see if it tastes as good as it looks. Oh yes, it really is delicious. Lionfish are certainly very beautiful. They're certainly very prolific, and they make very good eating. But that very fact that we caught over 800 by merely literally skimming the surface, because they go down to a depth of 400 feet, shows you the depth, excuse the pun, of the problem that we have here in the Caribbean and in coral reefs around the world. Perhaps here in Antigua and Barbuda we can turn it into an industry and a food source, and thereby protect our very vulnerable coral reefs. Thank you for being with me today. I hope you've learned something about coral reefs and about some of the dangers, and obviously that you can eat lionfish and they taste delicious. Please like, please share, please subscribe, and I'll be doing more for the stories from Antigua and Barbuda. I'm Zoe Carlton. I'm your dreamer in paradise.